Helena, welcome, welcome. And I'm so glad you're joining us for Trainer Talk. And
Yes.
we have people here to greet you from all over the world, from Canada and Carolinas and there's just New York and San Diego, Toronto. We just have people coming from the UK as well.
Oh, wow.
From Montreal. It's just lovely to that we can join you, and I'm happy to be introducing you to the group. You are a trainer from the UK.
Yes.
And it's just delightful to have you here with us. What would you like to tell the group about you in general before we start focusing in on seeding attachment?
Well, first I want to say it's really weird not to see the group.
Yes,
I just really want
on Zoom.
Yes, but it's such an honor to be asked to do this, and especially first outing like this as trainer. So it's an honor, and I'm just delighted that so many people want to join us, because seeding attachment is just something I'm really passionate about.
Makes such a difference, and you are passionate about it. You were noticing a difference in your work the more you utilize seeding attachment. I kind of think about attachment in three ways, and we're going to talk about the seeding attachment way. I kind of think about it as holding the attachment frame in general, kind of attachment wrapping everything. Oh, you do this because, and then the reframe when we're actually with the deeper emotion and we're reframing it for them and for their partner. And then the seeding attachment, which we're going to be talking about, which has kind of a different impact than the two other more ways that we generally, I think, talk about it. More commonly, we're talking about it in those other two ways.
I mean, the two ways you just mentioned actually are all part of seeding attachment.
Yeah.
That's the common ways. We don't necessarily think about it as seeding attachment, but it's very much part of seeding attachment. Anytime you're helping people see this is about attachment, what's going on here is actually about attachment.
We're planting those little seeds of helping them hold on to the attachment significance of what they're going through their blocks and the way that they're coping.
Exactly. So anytime we're saying, we're really specifying this is about attachment, this is about how important this person is to you, this is happening because you are so important to each other, you're seeding attachment. And also anytime you're tying all those reactive responses to how important they are to each other. I mean, that's not what couples are thinking about in those moments. I'm reacting like this, I'm getting triggered because this person is the most important person. They're just reacting, and we're bringing that lens in, and that is seeding attachment. So that's sort of the more common one.
Yeah.
But what got me curious, I don't know, you probably watched that YouTube clip I did in 2016. You're nodding your head, yes.
I remember. Yes, I remember.
Yes, and I just thought, I used to watch trainers do the live sessions, and I used to think, I can't put my finger on what it is, but they're doing something I'm not quite doing.
Yeah.
And that's what really got me curious, because if you look at a textbook, there's very little written about it. I think there's a page 74 in Sue's book, the second edition of Creating Connection, and also in the workbook, I think it's page 86. But watching the trainers, I actually really began to see they really have this fundamental belief that this is about attachment.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just a belief, it's actually alive in the room. They're working it so hard, and some people say they're milking it, they're egging it, but actually they're seeding it.
Yeah, that's a great framework, which comes, I think, directly out of some of Phil Shaver's research too, as well, right, around that. And then Sue really talking about it. She talks about it most in stage 2, right? In her writing, not in her use of it, but in the writings of it. And that was one of the things that you got very curious about, I think.
Yes, because Sue is always seeding. It's amazing. I mean, she's always seeding, but what's written about it is, it's not, there's not so much written about it. And the EFT community tends to think of seeding attachment as something you do in stage 2 when you're sort of inviting the possibility of reaching to the partner for secure connection.
That's
and
right.
that came about because of the research done by, what's his name now?
Brent Bradley.
Brent Bradley and Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that on blamer softening. That's when they observed that thing Sue was doing, right?
That's
that she
right.
was imagining the possibility of reaching to the partner. And people would go, oh, no, right?
Yes.
And
right.
then she'd go, oh, wow. She'd really validate where people were like, yes, you really cannot do this.
Yeah. And she'd hold it up as this contrast of something that they can't do.
Exactly.
So to really validate them, but at the same time, it has this kind of expectation built in that you can do it, but it'd be great if you could, and what a
it
difference
makes
it would make.
perfect sense that you don't.
Yeah.
And that's
So it's only validating, but really amplifying kind of the longing and the need for the reaching. So let's go back just a little bit. Because I hit on the two themes that I, am very familiar with that we talk about a lot in the EFT community around seeding attachment, attachment wrapping things, keeping that context up and alive, doing the reframe. But you found some very other, and you did some research. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, you got excited, you started to see something that was happening that you wanted to put your fingers on. You were in a program to do some research, and you decided to focus on seeding attachment. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's the funny story about it. Like, I was doing a thesis and I was going to actually research something completely different. I was going to compare psychodynamic couple therapy with emotionally focused couple therapy. And then it was just a little thought that I would put this video about seeding attachment on YouTube. And then the response was almost like, not divisive, but it was kind of controversial. Some people were saying, no, that's not seeding attachment, what you're talking about. Seeding attachment is this stage 2 thing. And I thought,
and I was one of those people.
I Becca, you were one of those people. And I was not, I was just, if I remember, I was just the supervisor. And I was thinking, Becca thinks this is wrong, but I'm not about to back down here. So I thought, why don't I do a research? Why don't I scrap my initial plan and do this research? And so I actually interviewed 8 trainers about what was their perspective on seeding attachment. And I analyzed 3 of them in detail, but I'm going to, carry on working on the other 3. But actually, it was really interesting researching people, because then you really get the nitty-gritty of it. How people really use seeding attachment in the room, how they really grow attachment in the room. That was really fascinating to really break it down. And I found 6 themes, right?
Yeah.
One was the usual reframing as attachment. And the other one was also priming vulnerability and the reaching to the partner. And that was more like what we think about in stage 2, prompting the stage 2 reach. But then, other things began to come up, like priming the longings. And that was the bit that I really love. Like, one of the people talked about going for an experience of a longing, right? What tends to block people from reaching is the fear. But if you really prime their longings, that's what makes it worth reaching. And that all the emotions will come just by priming the longings. All the emotions are going to come. The longing, the fear, all the different things you can go for direct, in terms of priming the possibility of reaching, but actually listening out for people's longings, the thing that's missing, the thing they're hoping for, the thing they're wishing. And it usually comes out as a criticism. He never does this or she never does that. But now you're listening for the longing. You go, you really wish, you really hope, you so much want, you're so longing for. And like Sue says, we're mammals, it's wired in. If you touch people's longings, something is going to happen inside.
So can you make that bridge from the criticism or the not having? Because I think one of the things that I see as I supervise folks is that they'll bring a longing, but they bring it more specific to the coping mechanism rather than to the underlying vulnerability, right? So if I have criticism, the longing for, it's not like they're criticizing, you never come home, you never call, you don't let me in, whatever.
Yes.
That the longing that you're seeding is not like, oh, you really, really want your person to come home on time, or you really want your person to hear and understand you. That's not what you're describing.
No, exactly. And I would very much have gone that way before, so I really hear how hard it is for you. You really wish you want him to come home. He doesn't come home. But now I will hear the longing. I will go, right. And it doesn't mean I'm priming. This is a distinction, right? I'm not priming the possibility of reaching, right, in stage 2. I'm not saying, can you imagine reaching? Can you imagine turning? That's the other one we're talking about, priming the vulnerability. But priming the longing is hearing, what this person is really saying is, I want my partner to come home sooner. I want to see my partner. Right, you really wish he'd come home. You're not asking anything of them. You're just priming the longing. You're stating it as a longing. And it softens the anger. It softens the fear. And it brings all the feelings that are around it to the surface, like the loss, the longing, the sadness, the loneliness of not having your longings met.
But it's not about coming home. It's the attachment because, right?
Exactly. So when you say
your sweetie matters to you, because you want to feel closer, right? It's not because I want you to come home on time. It's not about the
But this is where it's interesting. In stage 1, you want to be closer to, where they are. Right. So if there's a very reactive response, like a very reactive pursuer, if you say because he is so important, that's really important too. But you're twisting it slightly and you're close to where they are. Whatever they're protesting about, you're reframing it as a longing because you miss him, because you want him to come home, but you're not reflecting so much towards the anger or the thing that never happens. It's the longing that is not spoken, that's unsaid.
Yeah. So let's see if I can make that distinction, right?
Yes.
Which is, because we're trying to get away from the content, right? So
yes,
it's not so much about what the request is, what the criticism is about, what the view of self or view of other is necessarily. You never do this for me. You don't come home. It's not about, I asked you to do the dishes or asked you to stop criticizing. You just don't do it. It's not so much about that. It's about hearing what the pain is pointing to.
Exactly.
Right? The thing that is pointing to some sense of, do you really want to be with me? Right? Am I the one that's important to you? And we're not going to make a huge jump from the high criticism to like the unmet need. But you're going to be reflecting towards that, I think is what you're saying. Yeah.
That's right. You're reflecting towards the thing that's missing, the thing they wish for, and you're coating it. I like the way you use the word, Becca, wrapping it in attachment.
Yeah.
Right. The missing, it's the wanting, it's the hoping. Because because there is something about the partner that there is a longing embedded in that frustration. There's a longing embedded in that despair. There's a longing embedded in nothing I do, I can't please her.
Yeah. So these 6 themes that you have, and I guess we can review the 6 of them and then kind of land on each one and their differences. We've already talked about reframing or what I call kind of attachment wrapping, reframing in the context of attachment without doing the actual attachment reframe, right? Yeah. Generally holding the context of you're creating your life together, this person is important to you, right? They're the one that you want to lean on and count on, that you want to have your back, that general, this is your person, right?
Yeah, that's
that
right.
General context around the attachment bond.
Yeah, that's right. You're seeing that fundamentally this is all about attachment.
Yeah, that fundamentally everything that's going on between them, most everything has to do with that sense of not having the security of their bond. And then the second thing that stood out was priming the longings. And then let's see if we can just go through them. And then
priming vulnerability and reaching. And this is particularly in stage 2.
And that's the stage 2 move, priming the vulnerability and reaching, which we know from the blame or softening research. Yeah,
that's right. Right. That's what Brent Bradley and Jim Farrow did work on.
And then imagining the possibility, which is starting to, break all of this down, but moving towards starting to set up an enactment, I think. Imagining the possibility of having it. Yeah.
Yeah, imagining the possibility of secure connection, imagining just really imagine the possibility of something that's missed or feared
and
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then giving, we might want to land on some of these a little bit more, seeding imaginary scenarios.
Yeah, seeding imagery and scenarios.
Imagery and scenarios. That's right. Thank you.
Yes.
And then the final one is growing the seed. So we're going to keep the context alive. That's the first one. And then priming the longings, which you're just talking about.
Yes. Yes. Right? Yes. It's a way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a way to connect emotions to attachment longings. This feeling is because of this longing. This feeling is because this protest or this complaint is because of a longing.
Yeah. Yeah. This thing is missing. This thing is hurting. This is why you move into coping, is because you really need and want
you're missing
connection, to not be alone, to feel supported, to whatever that is, be heard.
Yes, to feel like you can please your partner. You know, it's very close to their language. It's very close to what they are saying, but it's a twist on it.
Yeah,
it's a twist.
So that's nice, right? Because you're representing the withdrawer too, in that sense of feeling enough.
Yeah, you wish you could.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you wish you could please her. You wish to get it right. Right, to be accepted for who you are. And you just see people tear up, because when you state it as a longing, it's almost like that picture forms that just the sense of it is awakened inside them. And I just see people now, just there's something, it softens the fear, it softens the anger.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to amplify it, right? And to think about it as softening. It's like the coping mechanism starts to set down, and the vulnerability starts to come up. We start to see the pain emerge rather than the coping behavior, right?
That's right. If I say to you, so wish, just to be accepted for who you are, that who you are is enough. I'm not asking you to reach, but I just touch that place inside of you where you really feel not enough. And then all the feelings around that start to surface. And then I can work with it.
Yeah. Then you can be there with it and be with the pain, and then kind of organize it. You'd be on the tango then. That would bring you out of the reactivity onto the organizing it on the tango.
Yeah. Yes. And what I just love so much about priming the longings is now when I hear criticism, my ears go, bingo, longing, and I can frame it that way, right? And it's just like with practice, you just become so attuned to hear the longing embedded in the complaint, in the criticism, in the protest. It's just
At a
like,
distance. Yeah.
yeah, in the distance. You know, you want to feel safe. Of course, you want to feel safe. You just need some space,
Yeah. You
right?
need some space from this pain. You need some space from
Mhm.
this sense you're not making it.
Yeah.
So all those reflections that you're doing can, you say like with the twist, is reflecting it towards the attachment meaning,
And
and
long.
more specifically to the longing, right?
Mhm.
More specifically to the longing.
But you're saying something important there, Becca, because when you say the meaning, that's also going to point you towards the longing. What would it mean to you if he did or if she did, right? Then you will get the longing, right? So you're pointing towards the longing, anything that points you towards the longing. So you're on the money with that one, right? The meaning.
Yeah, so one way that you can do as we think about the elements of emotion is that you can really use any one of those elements, whether it's the behavior, the criticism, or the
Yes.
meaning making, or the
Mm.
emotion, like the actual anger or disappointment or hopeless feeling, or
Yeah.
in through the bodily response. You can go into any one of those and
And
be
connected to the longing.
connected to the longing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Validating the coping mechanism and connecting it to the longing. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's really priming the longings
Mm-hmm.
that helps slow things down and brings the vulnerability alive into the room.
Yeah, it surfaces it. You know, you have something to work with there and then. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with our very difficult couples, that's a really important thing. It takes us out of session management into really starting to work with the elements of emotion.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And you're putting it to active use in the service of attachment.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so let's just check in. Is there questions? Please use the chat box if there's questions other than from me. If we have questions that we can be asking to our expert here on seeding attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we go down to imagining the possible, or priming the vulnerability for and reaching, and that's more of the stage 2
Yeah, that's more.
way that we've studied pursuer softening.
Yeah, so that's what maybe more people would be familiar with. You know, you could never, can you imagine? But again, if you don't prime it, it's logical that people don't go there,
Yeah.
right? So if we don't prime those longings, if
They
we
have to
that
be in that vulnerability before you could ask them, could they, um, or you have to be priming the longing and holding that up around them before the vulnerability would emerge and before they could reach with vulnerability.
right, so you're holding to, it's like you're holding two parts, the fear and the longing, right? And so when you prime the longing and you really walk around in that longing, then when they're in the longing, because this is not psycho ed, it's not about teaching people that they should turn, right? It's when you're really holding them in that vulnerability and you've got their partner on board and attuned, and then you're seeding the, you're saying, can you imagine? Or the person said, you could never turn to
Right.
this person, right? You could never turn to him or her when you're feeling so what?
Yeah.
Inadequate,
Yeah.
anxious, worried, whatever. You could never turn to her and let him or her into this place. No, I could never.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but you're priming the possibility that they could actually turn in those moments and share.
Yeah. And as we prime it, we actually want to see the blocks that emerge so we can work with them. And
Yeah.
so being the way you're describing it is I'm actually being with a block. You could never, ever. You just told me you
Mm,
couldn't do that thing that I was suggesting maybe you could, or could you even imagine? Like I can't
exactly.
even imagine it. Then
Mm-hmm.
we're really being there with them, with the block, so
Mm,
that we continue to deepen their experience,
yes.
their emotion, and
Mm,
their different elements of emotion so that they are getting a new experience that uh, someone actually is with them, as the
mm,
therapist is. So We're
Yeah.
kind of supporting that there is a possibility, because it's possible with us, which makes
Yeah.
we don't do that in a cognitive way, but in an experiential way, we're there with them.
In that vulnerability, right?
In the vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the key thing to remember, is that, in stage 2, you're really holding them in that vulnerable place. And then rather than the fear cementing them to the ground, it's like the longing kind of comes in and pulls them through the fear to reach, right? Because if not, the fear is just going to keep you here. But
Right.
the longing is what will enable you to reach past your fear, right? And reach to the partner.
Yes, it's so important. Because what we're doing, as we're talking about stage 2, is we're heightening the vulnerability. But if we heighten the vulnerability um, without the way through, then we just, like you said, we just slam people to the ground. They can get plastered down in that. Oh, you feel so inadequate. It's so awful and hard and terrible that you feel so inadequate. And like, if that's all we do is heighten it, that's not particularly helpful, right? You feel so inadequate that you're alone without your partner. We've got to keep that longing. You feel so inadequate when you want so much to be seen as enough, right? We're holding the fear, the difficult feeling, right alongside with that longing, as you're describing, because the longing then does provide that way through. Yeah.
There is something, like there's something worth reaching for, right? Past your fear. It has to feel like, okay, you're holding both, right? You're holding the fear and you're holding the longing. And you do want to hold the fear, because the whole point is you want them to have this new experience of dealing with that vulnerability in a whole different way, by reaching, right?
Yeah.
By reaching. But if you don't hold that longing, it's just not worth the reach.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I'll just, because all I feel is like my fear is true, and that's just going to happen again. Right. There's
Exactly.
no possibility of something else. So no reason to reach, really.
There's no reason to reach. And I mean, I love the way Sue does it. Like, you could never.
Never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever.
And then she states the longing. You could never, ever go to him and say, and you could never this. But she's so affirming you. You're going, yeah, I could never. So she's got your buying. And then she then slots in the longing, right? And you could never turn to her and say, but because you've kind of gone along with, yes, I could never. No, I totally agree with you. Then the longing, you're already with her. She's already with you. And then she slots in the longing. And I think that's the key part. She slots in the longing. What follows the you could never or you can't imagine is the longing.
You can't imagine hearing
Can
from
you
your partner,
imagine?
sharing with your partner,
Mm.
being connected when you're so afraid, letting your partner see this part of you. Yeah.
Mm. Yes. So that's very much in stage 2. But then the other one, and I always saw it as two quite the same, but the other theme was imagining the possibility.
Yeah.
And it was actually quite helpful to separate out the two, right? Because priming vulnerability and reaching is very much stage 2. But imagining the possibility, and that's the bit I love, is that imagining the possibility of a secure connection. It's almost like you're not even asking much of them other than, can you imagine, can you visualize this thing that possibly they have never imagined really fully? It's not even a possibility. You haven't seen it with your parents. You've never even experienced it with your partner. And this possibility is being floated. And I just think it could be an experience that they've been missing, something that they fear. And just
it's so important. This piece I also love, because one of the things that is problematic for us in general is the dropout rate as people start to de-escalate.
Exactly.
And if we're not helping them imagine the possibility of having something they've never known, and
Yes.
some of our couples have one safe person or some safe persons out there, right? But many of them don't. There was insecure. They don't have the resiliency in the one person, and they can't imagine it with their sweetheart because they maybe had it for a brief time during courtship or something, but then it's been lost. And of course, many of the people that we see didn't even have it in their courtship. They had enough to stay connected or get connected, but they didn't ever really have that sense of security, or else, most of them wouldn't enter into our offices. So it's a problem if we're not doing enough imagining the possibility, and if they've never known it, why would they know to continue in therapy once the fight has stopped, right? Once they've de-escalated, if they don't imagine the possibility, we will lose them. They won't continue through to stage 2.
What is there to risk for more? What would keep you in there, right? Like,
right.
And if you're in so much pain because of the cycle, once the pain stops, that's it. You want to send the patient home, right? That's, but actually the possibility that you could walk again, right? Just like painting something that, and I think for me, it's also that thing of, I didn't watch my parents were not particularly close. Right. They did not model that for me. I didn't have that in particularly my own relationship. So it was just so lovely to watch the trainers really painting a possibility that I'm going, what? You mean you can actually have that?
Yeah.
Right. And it's just like people are going, you can almost see them doing this sort of like, what? And you've got their interest, right?
Yeah. So imagining the possibility, we're going to let's make some specifics about how we can use that in stage 1. We're of course using our attunement, we're using client words, we're using that longing that you're listening for very early on to expand that, the difficulty in imagining it or really organizing it in the way that they've never had it. So of course it might be difficult to imagine. Yeah, what else comes to your mind around that as we are seeding that? It's a very specific kind of emotionally loaded attachment image for them and their sweetheart.
Yes, and that's the important thing, is emotionally loaded. It's something that's missed. They are referring to it, maybe, or maybe they're not even referring to it because it's just not on their radar. But you're actually unfolding, and one of the people I interviewed used the word dramatically unfolding a missing attachment experience. And it was quite dramatic the way this person did it. It was like, can you imagine? And it was almost like frame by frame painting a picture. Can you imagine that you would go to him and you would put your head against his shoulders, and he would put his arms around you and hold you and comfort you. And it's almost like you're watching this film and it's coming alive. It's dramatically being unfolded. Right. So I don't know if it's more of a stage 2, but there was just something about really unfolding it frame by frame, and almost like you can see the neural pathways firing up. Like you would go to him, you would put your head on his shoulders, and he would put his arms around you and hold you and comfort you. What's even happening as I talk about this? What's coming up for you? Right.
That's beautiful. So as we're listening to them through those early de-escalation sessions, that we are paying attention to their particular longings.
Yeah.
And then we're starting to paint that picture. We're starting to help them imagine the possibility that there's something more out there, and that we're going to continue to work towards having them receive that and have that. Yeah.
Right. We're just literally painting a picture of what that would, because what you're trying to help them is imagine it, visualize it, this
Kind
picture
of
of
taste
your
it.
yes, taste it, feel it, bring it alive. It's like, it's literally helping people, because part of the reason is that people may not have had that experience, so they don't even know what it looks like. You're
Yeah.
painting a whole new picture of what it would look like, feel like. It's almost like you're in imagination walking them through it.
And that's a
Without,
great time to do that as we, on the tango, as we're doing move 5. Look at what you guys just did. Right.
yes.
As they start to have a little bit of compassion or understanding from the enactments and the sharing as we wrap up, we can say, oh, look at what you just did. You're calming the cycle. You had this moment of understanding each other. That sense that you could really be a team, that maybe at some point you'll actually be able to feel so secure with each other that you wouldn't have to tap down your emotion. You could really come to your partner and be received just for who you are, right?
Oh, yes, yes. That is
It's a
justification.
great time to do that, to help them as they're de-escalating, to
Yeah.
like keep that, oh, there's something more than we just stopped fighting, right? And every time we go around the tango, we have that possibility of going, look, let's review what you just did. And wow, so I saw you make this progress, and
Mm.
and and that's where we're headed, that you could have more of this, right?
You know,
And it wouldn't just last a second. You could actually, in pain, be able to, right?
oh, I'm just smiling, just Rebecca, listening to you, because you've introduced another little twist and element. I love that, because it's almost like, Hansel and Gretel, you're just dropping the next stone on the track, right? And I
Yeah.
love the way you're tying it to the last move of the tango. Look what you just did. And can you imagine then taking this next little
Or
step?
I can imagine you at
Oh,
some
I
point.
can
This is
imagine
where
you.
we're headed, right? And I do
Yeah.
that. I bring that up because it's one of the ways I've really found over the years that helps prevent that dropout rate is,
Yeah.
I kind of call it giving a commercial for what's going to happen in stage 2. Like I, as the therapist, have helped other couples come through. This is not what I say, but in my mind, I'm like, I know they can get someplace different, and they're not going to stay and come if the only thing they can imagine is that the fight has stopped. We have to,
Yeah.
offer them that there's really more, and as humans, we actually need that more. And for their relationship, they need that more. And I found it so helpful to do some of that picture painting about what we're going to be working on, what we're doing, and bringing it into that that really experiential, highly emotional
Yes.
image of what it might be like. We don't actually know what it's going to be like for them, but we're learning each couple's
Yeah.
work, what their longings are, what triggers them, and then we're listening for that longing. Longing is the antidote, right, to the trigger, because we're helping them heal that process. So using that very loaded emotional image.
Yes. Oh, Becca, that's so nice, that loaded image. I just love that, the way you've tied it on, because, we're like the tourist guide, right?
Right.
We know all the places they can visit, and we've done it hopefully enough times, right? And you use the word information or whatever, like, this is the next thing. This is why you should come and watch the next episode. And we
That's
have
right.
to have, exactly, and we have to have that image, right? And I think that was what I really needed to learn when I was learning from the scratch. EFT was, and that was really what I learned from the trainers, like, oh, this is what I can see. Do you mean this is the next step? Like, this is exciting. And I love the way you're tying it to the tango, the wrapping up and the next thing we can do. It's exciting. See, I really get excited.
It's so fun to chat with you about this. And we're getting some really nice comments in the chat box too. that we're really enjoying being with you and sharing your research and your learning. It's so helpful. And this imaginary aspect, the other thing that I want to say about the imaginary aspect and is that mentalization piece. We use that, can you imagine? We use that not just in the wrap up, but specifically when we're talking about seeding the scenarios and the possibility of where they're going.
Yes.
You know, it's different than other times when we're using the imaginary piece, because often we're using that imaginary piece to see if there's any other blocks, right?
Yes.
Could you imagine turning and sharing this? What would it be like to turn it? When we prompt them at the enactment phase in move 2, what would it be like? Can you imagine doing it? It's not like we're yet saying, do it. I want you to do it. We're just saying, are you grounded enough in the emotional experience? And is that kind of longing up and running enough that you could imagine sharing? We're not reaching. We're just like letting you into my inner experience. And that mentalization piece is really important, because when we say, could you imagine, or what would it be like to turn, that we actually, and we have to, as people, then imagine it, right? And then the limbic response, the limbic appraisal comes up, yes or no, right?
Exactly.
And if they're really grounded into the emotional experience and they feel really connected with us and safe to do it, no, regardless of how their partner is going to respond, that they feel kind of grounded in their own body and in their own experience, then we more often get, it would be hard, but I think I could do it, rather than no. So that's a great, you know, even bringing the imaginary piece up, I think imagining piece up is so important, because it can help us stay very close to their experience, as well as giving them kind of a future orientation about what's coming up.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the things I have noticed is when I do these imaginary walkthroughs with them, what's really funny is next time they can come in and they just say, oh, we did blah, blah, blah. It's almost as if you embedded something in there. And because it's such an emotionally loaded image that you walk through with them, it's almost like they've done a dress rehearsal. And I say to them sometimes, you've cheated me of my softening tape on video. You've done it out of session. But I really think it's primed it. That's what seeding is, right? You're planting the seeds of security, and who knows when they're going to flower.
Yeah. Yeah. And that priming is the word that, if anyone's looking at Shaver research, that's the word that he used, priming security. Wanda, you had this, Wanda Garner, I think that's you, Wanda, right? Wanda Garner, a supervisor in San Diego, added, can you imagine him or her really hearing you and holding you and comforting you? Right? That's a beautiful way to bring up those, hold and support their longings, and really be connected to them, that we're really like, our alliance just goes up when we're really with them, validating those longings and desires, and the pains, is, of course, as well, but that using that attachment language, like Wanda just said, you know, can you imagine him really hearing you? It's like, it starts to chip away at that negative view of self, and I'm not worth it already. You know, it's all of these kind of moving us towards softening and connection all along.
Yes, but even you saying it, can you see? Even you saying it, I'm feeling it, right? And that's actually what happens to clients. Can you imagine being heard, right? Yes. And you know, that's what we want our clients to feel: seen and heard and held and understood and accepted.
Right.
And when you just use that, it's just like, I could feel it, right?
Yeah. And it also, Wanda mentions, it does also help with the negative view of other, because we're in essence saying, I can see your partner being there for you too, right? Like, it's not an unreasonable thing to imagine. It's an implicit message there around that.
Yes.
So how about growing the seed? Let's talk
Well, I
about.
want to say one thing about seeding imagery and
Okay,
scenarios, because it
great.
feels as it's exactly the same as imagining the possibility. But it's also one of the people I interviewed said something that was so helpful to me. She said, oh, I shouldn't say gender, whatever, but okay, recognizing foreign attachment territory, right? That was actually quite useful to me because it's that moment where you suddenly realize this person doesn't know what I'm talking about. I need to paint a picture. And so now I have much more of a sensitivity to realizing as I'm seeding, does this even resonate anywhere?
Oh, yeah, right.
Is this even a territory that they even recognize, right? And when you're seeding imagery and scenarios, when you're trying to really, this imaginary walkthroughs or images, it's actually when you don't assume, you're so attuned that you recognize that this person, this is foreign territory. I'm going to really need to flesh this out. So that's just another little subtle thing I really got out of seeding imagery and scenarios is, not only are you using their own images of attachment, secure attachment, like when people say, I don't have a partner, I don't have a teammate, they're telling you what their image of secure attachment is, having a teammate,
Right. That's right.
right? And if you use their own words, or if their own memories of a time when they did feel really securely attached, if you're using their own words, that's going to land so much better.
Okay, so you're helping us make sure that we don't that we see differently the imagining the possibility,
Mm-hmm.
right, of having the secure connection or of reaching,
Mm-hmm.
right, the more being really specific about it, and then seeding just the general idea in their image, with the imagery they have, with their
Yeah.
metaphors, with their scenarios, for people that really don't, maybe have it, and to make it more specific so that we're really alongside if they haven't had that, if attachment is foreign to them. They don't really know attachment security, but they have a general longing, because we all have that general longing. Even
Yeah.
if we don't have it, even if we've never had it, we'll recognize some emptiness, some missing, something,
Mm.
some unknowing. And so that becomes very specific to each couple,
Mm.
and it is loaded emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
um, different than just dramatically unfolding it as we do with imagining the possibility,
Right.
right? And it's going really much more specific to them,
To their
um,
own their
and their
own
own imagery.
and their own imagery. So I'll give you an example. I'm working with a couple where she really wants out of the relationship because of an injury and things like that. And she often uses the word, I don't have a teammate. And I began to recognize that there's something about I don't have a teammate, which is I want a teammate. And I actually don't know what that image is for her. So I asked her to really take me through. And he was listening, because that's the other thing we have to be aware of, that our partners don't often know what we mean by, they often don't know what we mean by what would be secure attachment to us. It's almost like they need the handbook too, right? Your handbook, right? I asked her to take me through what it would be like to have a teammate.
Yeah.
And by the time she'd fleshed it out, she was crying because she was in touch with her longing
Yeah.
completely. And then from then on, I started using having your teammate, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
every time I do that, I wet her longing and has kept her in,
Right. Right.
right? The
Because
possibility of
you
having
can
it.
really hear it. She knows you're hearing it.
And
The,
I have an image of it too, because that's what secure attachment means to her, having a teammate. And I know what she means. I'm not assuming. It's not something I read in Mills and Boone or in romantic novel. I have her own image now in my head.
yeah.
Mm.
So Jonathan is asking a question about, and I didn't know that your research addresses this specifically, but we both have probably a sense of it, which
Mhm.
is when we use you language versus we language, when
Mhm.
we keep it, those so that the attachment longings and the
Mhm.
frame is more around the unit, around the
Yes.
couple,
Mhm.
versus you want this or you want that, right?
Mm.
And he says it seems like a logical extension of seeding attachment and the longings to have the we part of it. And I think that is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's everything that it's about, is keeping the
Mm.
context of the
Mm.
couple
Mhm.
relationship up and running.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
can you think of any specific times or ways that it's more we language than you language?
Yeah,
I
so
think of it. Yeah, you go ahead, and I'll
no,
add
you
mine.
go first. I want to hear yours,
Oh,
Becca.
okay. Well, I think of it really in highly distressed couples,
Mhm.
and as part of trying to work around de-escalation,
Mhm.
specifically, right? Like
Mhm.
around framing the negative cycle. Uh,
Mhm.
Sometimes when you have those complex cycles and they
Mhm.
both do both moves,
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
use a lot of that um, kind of bridging or joining by using
Mhm.
that language more specifically when I'm on the tango even, right? So when you're
Mhm.
starting the affect assembly,
Mhm.
um, keeping the other part, we're always keeping the other partner in mind, but I'm using more general we and us language.
Mm.
It's like you both get stuck here. This is a hard
Yeah.
place for both of you. So I'm doing a lot more of that to keep not only the attachment frame
Mhm.
running as the context, but
Mhm.
specifically around the coping mechanisms. And then
Yeah.
again in move 5, when I'm, organizing and reviewing the
Mm.
progress. Look at what
Mm.
you guys did. And that's maybe a little bit different than leave-in, or there's more specificity when we're working with trauma around when to use that than the way that I think we're talking right now. But what are your ideas around it?
Well, I was just thinking, I mean, I really totally agree with Jonathan, right? And it's things like when you say bringing the we back into the relationship. Yeah. It's like really feel like we're bringing the we back. Yeah. Both of you fighting the cycle together, right?
Yeah.
Bringing the we back. Yeah. I really hear the we coming back in. I really hear both of you now on the same team. Yeah. We're working on this together. It's when you use proxy voice, right?
Right.
When you use proxy voice, we're gonna do this together. We can do this together. We've got each other's backs, right? We're singing from the same song sheet.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's like when
So
you start to bring that unifying language in, I would imagine.
yeah, that's right. That's so important that
Mm.
we are keeping the we in mind,
Mm. Mm.
And then of course
Mm.
as we do the affect assembly, it's more individual, but even then at times and with certain clients and situations, we're having to keep
Mm.
that up and running because they can't tolerate the isolation, right?
Mhm.
They can't tolerate, the shame comes in and takes them away.
From each other.
So
The
yeah, for
last,
me,
yes, the last one, I can see the time. The
yep, I
last
was
one
going to
is
say, let's do
growing
it.
the seed. Let's grow in the seed, right? You grow the seed using the tango. Whenever you're completing, the moves of the tango, you're growing the seed, right? Because you're creating a corrective emotional experience of,
Yeah.
you know, going deep into the vulnerability, sharing your vulnerability, having the partner hear it, and helping them see what they've just done. So you grow the seed, you doing the tango, right? The main thing to recognize, and that was the main thing I realized, right? If you're impatient like me, you grow the you seed and you expect immediate results, like nothing's happening. You know, what is this seeding thing anyway? It doesn't work, right? But the thing to know is that do it 5, 6 times,
Yeah.
right? You really have to water it, right? It's a slow process. And seeds don't grow overnight, but to trust that it's a slow process. And the secret is to repeat it, to keep doing it. because you don't plant a seed and then dig it up and wonder why it's not growing. You trust that by seeding, this is a slow process, it's going to happen, right? So that's the
keep nurturing it. It's like the watering it and putting sunlight on it, keeping it warm, all of those things that help it grow.
And then the other thing is, you know, when you're seeding, monitor whether what's happening, the emotional responses. Like when you start to seed longings, if you're really paying attention, you will notice people's eyes soften. You will notice the quality of the voice change. You will just notice. So notice the emotional responses to your seed. And if you're getting a response, go for it.
Pour some more water there. It's thirsty.
Right? Exactly. So monitor it. Expect it to be a slow process, but monitor what's happening. And when you see it happening, that's your chance to go in. And when it does actually start to flower, celebrate it.
Yeah,
you know, that's the move 5, right? Move 5 of the tango. Oh, I learned something from you, Becca, today. You know, not only will I celebrate it, and I'll go, look, and next episode, we're going to be doing, you know, like that, right?
Right.
But really to explicitly celebrate the emergence of attachment. Because we're growing attachment, and when it starts to grow, we want to celebrate it.
Yes, we want to celebrate every little incremental change. Sometimes it's just a delay in the negative response, right? Sometimes you're just able to stay a little bit longer before the negative cycle comes in. And so we have to keep that eye for entrusting the growth, the development. The seed is there. Maybe it's not in full bloom. Maybe it hasn't really even surfaced out from underground yet. But we're trusting, oh, look at, you know, and sometimes it's just that they continue to come, right? They continue to come, so they're feeling something. There's still some hope alive in there. And we're growing it, right?
Yes. And that's, I think, what I really got out of seeding attachment, that actually literally, you're trying to see attachment that this is about attachment, and that you're actually growing it. I mean, that's the fascinating thing, that you're growing attachment.
It is.
I feel like I'm stating something very obvious, but that's what you're trying to grow. You're trying to grow. Attachment is the longing to connect and the fear of losing that connection. And you're literally growing the longing to connect, and you're making it safe to connect.
Yeah. And then their bond gets strong, and we grow individually, and we grow in the relationship, which helps us be more secure, not only in the relationship, but in ourselves. So it's really a beautiful, beautiful thing. There's a question from Murray. We started a little bit late, so I don't want to be over time, but we probably have a couple of minutes since we came on a little bit late to be on an hour. I know maybe not everyone can stay, but Murray did want to, let me just read you this question and see if we can organize ourselves around it. Would you talk about how you talk about attachment differently in stage 1 than in stage 2? Sometimes I am finding to try and sort this out, that it could limit me responding to what is happening in front of me.
Yeah.
So I found myself saying a lot of what you're saying in stage 1, but I'm thinking I'm supposed to be doing this depth. I'm maybe not supposed to be doing this depth until stage 2. Is that right, Murray? That you don't think maybe you're supposed to be doing that depth until stage 2?
Well, I mean, that's, you know, Sue has just really made us very clear that there's stage 1 and there's stage 2, and stage 1 is very much about de-escalating. And I think maybe if I really understood her well, we really want to stay as close to where people are. So if anything, stage 1 is very much about the reframing as about attachment, as about significance, about the importance of the relationship. Yeah.
It's a much more general, right? And the more safe they are, the more deep and specific we can go, because they can tolerate the depth of vulnerability. And so it's that's an important thing. The other thing I do want to say, if we're working with trauma couples, then one of the things that prevents de-escalation is the dropping into depth without having the framework, without having that fortification of the scaffolding, right? Because that's one of the things that happens in trauma is those internal boundaries aren't really developed. And so we can go way deep, way fast. And then the, what I would call abreaction, you know, the coping mechanism can come back on fire after an experience of like a vulnerability hangover, using Brene Brown's term. So we want to be careful about that. We are in de-escalation. So Maria, I think you're right on about that.
Yeah, and I think actually, you know, Mario, you're actually saying something that we should come with that health warning. When I go on about, priming the longings, in stage 1, you're not asking them to do anything with it.
You're not asking to do anything with it. Yeah.
You're not asking them to reach. You're not asking them. You're literally in stage 1, painting the just beginning to see the possibility of a different kind of interaction, but you're not asking them to reach.
And well, and actually, to begin with, you're just letting them know that you're with them and you see them.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what's causing them pain. Right?
Exactly.
And that's the most that we're doing is we're starting to have them, yes, and when I'm in this pain, this is what I do, because we're linking that pain up to their coping behavior. But us being with that longing, recognizing, noticing the absence of it, the wanting of it, the needing of it, helps us then be with them in their vulnerability so they can start to link up with their coping mechanism, right? So I love what you're saying. It's not that we're asking them to reach, to share. We're really not linking the vulnerability, the pain with the longing, more specifically until stage 2, right?
That's right.
We're linking, instead of linking up the pain to coping, in stage 2, we start to link the pain down with the longing. So they can begin to imagine sharing it and begin to start sharing it.
In stage 1, we're just trying to use some of their images, and we're just trying to help them be aware this is about the fact that you're so important to each other.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Becca.
Thank you for your research. Thank you for correcting me in my limited thinking about what seeding attachment was, because I was really like, we've got these 3 things and they're different. You know, attachment wrapping is different than reframing, and that's different than seeding that we do in stage 2 when we go, you never, ever, ever could. Yeah. So yes, it's nice to have them kind of all under the same umbrella and have those attachment themes where we can recognize the need to keep it up and running and the different ways that we can do that.
Yes, and if you share that with them, the one I sent out to you, then then they have it, right? And I find it so useful now. I have it.
And so I will share that. We have a handout for you, and I will share that as a download. So you'll all get an email about that.
Thank you so
very much.
Everyone for coming and listening, and yes.
It was great to have you join in today, and for all to be with us and share your expertise. And I certainly enjoyed being with you and representing the group to you. And what a lovely group of EFT therapists that we have. So thank you for supporting Trainer Talk and being ICEEFT members. And watch for some more about how you can utilize the attachment and seeding attachment as the handout comes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.